Welcome to Social Capital Expert, a show where we discover the value of social capital and how cultivating strategic relationships is critical to our success. In each episode, your host, Sarah Frances McDaniel, will explore the stories of fascinating people from all over the world to better understand how their ability to build relationships has led to their success. We will uncover tips, tricks, and practical ways that you too can become a social capital expert. Hi, and welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have today's guest, KRISTEN BLESSMAN. KRISTEN, thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, KRISTEN, you have so much awesome stuff going on right now, but before we get there, will you tell us a little bit about maybe where you're from and kind of how you got started?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. I have been in the nonprofit industry, how long now? I've worked for both for-profit and nonprofit, but I've spent probably about the last, I would say, 15 years working in nonprofit. And it's kind of been sort of an interesting journey for me that has really come full circle, I think, just in the past couple years. I think I was drawn to nonprofit just based on how I grew up. I grew up in a very, very loving, very dysfunctional household. We had a lot of addiction in my family, and I learned about addiction at a very young age and how it affects communities and families. And I never really started to work in nonprofits because I had a bleeding heart. I think, I had seen so much around me by the time I entered into my career. But I think what drew me to nonprofit is they're masters of change. And I think I had to experience so much change in my own personal life, just learning how to navigate the environment and the chaos that I grew up with, as well as learning how to navigate that in my life and experiencing change on my own as well. And so, looking back on it now, I think that that's what really drew me to them. And I'm a change agent leader. And so I love to tell the story about how I learned about change through nonprofit. When I was working at Regis University, I witnessed a soldier who was dodging bullets to get his MBA degree. He had grown up in poverty, and he had a 2-year-old son and didn't want that same experience for him. So was basically willing to risk his life in order to get his master's. I witnessed a woman who got clean from a meth addiction, got out of jail, got her kids back, got a job, and then dedicated her life to be an addiction counselor to help others do the same.
Wow.
When I was at Goodwill, I remember my son was 3 when I started there, and they had a program for individuals with disabilities, and it was mostly for adults. It was a work program. And I saw a woman walk her son up to our office where he worked, and he looked like he was in his 20s, and I had just dropped my son off at daycare. And it just struck me, where would her child go if we weren't here?
Right.
And so the idea of I think I just got hooked on watching the transformation that human beings are able to make. And because I have a business mind, right? Like, I'm not afraid to cut programs. I'm pretty wicked when it comes to that stuff, right? And I realize that that's why I'm a turnaround change agent leader. I'm not afraid to do what's necessary, but I'm completely hooked on watching what human beings are able to do given the adversity that they go through. And so, I probably won't be a nonprofit forever. I'd like to create some change in for-profit organizations because I think nonprofits do it so well, and I want to teach that to other organizations. But that's really what brought me on my path, and it gets addicting after a while.
Wow, that's awesome. And it's so cool just to hear your passion for wanting to see people grow and change and develop.
Yeah.
When you look at your course, like, where did you sort of start where you immediately knew you were going to go into the nonprofits, or did you kind of come from the for-profit and then move in, or what was some of the details? What were some of those jobs?
So I started my career out in sales, which I think is such a wonderful way to start because you learn very early on how important the customer is and how they drive everything that you do. You know, it's so interesting. I don't know if you follow the work of the Business Roundtable. Have you heard of it?
No, but that sounds
So
awesome.
the Business Roundtable is a group of approximately 180 CEOs, like CEOs of really big companies in America, and they sort of set the stage for how companies should operate successfully and what they should be thinking about and what trends are out there. And the most recent meeting, they proclaimed how important conscious capitalism is. And basically what that is no longer is it most important to focus on your shareholders and making sure that they're happy, because they're not going to be happy unless first your employees feel invested in and happy, they invest in the communities that they're a part of, and then also making sure that their customers feel value. And so I think, you know, when you start out in sales, you just by nature get that immediately, right? You have to work with employees internally and make sure that they're working with you and also make sure that the customer's needs are met. So I feel so fortunate that that's where I started. But I've always been in very long-term relationship sales. So I've had the ability to build deep and meaningful relationships with our customers, and I really liked that start. And so I think, you know, being fortunate enough to start out in for-profit with that was really meaningful. I had an opportunity to work in New York City for a while for a Japanese corporation, which was just such an incredible experience because especially now that I'm at the Women's Chamber, right, to learn about that diverse perspective and their approach to business was incredible. And I'm not sure if this is part of Japanese culture overall, but it definitely was part of the culture for the company that I worked for. We worked so hard. I mean, it was definitely ingrained, right? Like we're going to work hard, but we're also going to play hard.
Yeah.
And they just took really, really good care of us. Just fun, right?
Yeah.
Family-owned business. So when the family would come into town, we'd all go out and, you know, go karaoke or go out to dinner and just spend time with each other. And it was the first time that I had really experienced such an incredible culture where we just knew our employees and we felt taken care of and we felt like a family.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of my for-profit experience. And interestingly enough, like I said, I never got into nonprofit because I had a bleeding heart. I never set out to say, oh, I want to work for a nonprofit because I want to do good in the world. It just kind of happened to me. And like I said, when you witness that change and when you're around it all the time, you kind of get hooked. So I loved the idea of saying, okay, I'm really good at marketing. I'm very good at sales. I'm good at business skills and leading an organization, leading a department. But there's something about being able to use that for good and spreading that good message that I really got hooked on. And again, I think for-profits, you know, you're not going to be able to do conscious capitalism unless you can practice that type of behavior. So I think it's going to be an interesting time to see what happens between nonprofit and for-profit. I've always heard the idea of, oh, well, nonprofits are great and isn't it great work that you do, but those skills don't really transfer to for-profits. And I really think that we're going to see that change now because they are practicing more of this, you know, conscious capitalism, getting involved in communities, valuing employees, valuing your customers. These are practices that nonprofits have been using for years and years and years. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's awesome. And thank you for sharing that with us. We, you know, when you say this, like building community and being involved and being invested, I mean, it's huge. And in the topic of social capital, you know, often people are like, well, what do you think, how do you think you build influence? And I truly believe it's by building goodwill.
Yeah.
By creating something positive for the people around you or the community that you're involved in. And by being part of that solution and hearing what that need is and doing something. And it's so exciting to hear that some of these big brands and big companies are starting to be more aware of their actual engagement in the communities that they're involved in.
Yeah, we have a lot of members that are like that as well. Excel Energies is one of our strongest supporters, and they do a day of service here locally. And lots of companies do days of service, right? It's not new. They get all their employees together and rally, and they do different projects around town. Excel Energy is interesting because they invite the community to participate with them. And I
Oh.
thought that that was really cool. You know, they organize these big outreaches to nonprofits, but they also allow people from the community to participate as well. And what a cool way to rally. And then just get
Yeah.
out to the community and have your employees meet people. So I loved that idea.
Yeah, isn't it so huge when these corporations, I was just having a conversation today with some big corporation people, and how do we take that message? And that's what they were asking. How do we take what we're really good at the top and what our headquarters team spends all of this time and money to build, and these e-blasts and social campaigns and all of this stuff, but how do we actually connect it to the real live human being that we're trying to connect to? And a
Right.
lot of that has to do with actually building some of those true relationships, human to human, and
Yeah,
creating that human capital.
I agree. And again, I think we're just beginning to scratch the surface on that.
Well, I'm really excited to see how that all ends up
Yeah.
transpiring over these next several years, and hopefully it doesn't take a decade, but sometimes these kinds of
Yeah.
things seem to take a little while. But in looking at kind of the idea of social capital and with your roles and your experience, would you say that there's a few key ingredients to developing that kind of capital?
You know, you said something in your previous response that made me think about something. And you know, it's interesting that you ask the question of, you know, kind of tell me your story, how you got to where you are. Some people reference childhood. You know, I don't think society or companies really value enough someone's personal journey. For instance, I don't think that I could be a change agent leader and have the leadership qualities and style that I have had I not gone through what I went through as a child, right? I
Right.
learned to navigate chaos essentially, right? Like, oh, I'm going to stay away from that. I'm going to go change that. I'm going to do this. And I developed these incredible skills as a result that this organization just happened to need and also greatly values. And I never have to be ashamed of telling my story, right? I remember the
Yeah.
first time it was a women's chamber event and I was getting ready to, I felt compelled to say, okay, if this is a series where we're going to share our story, I'm going to share my story, all the dirt, all the everything that I went through. And I remember telling somebody that, and they're like, you can't do that. This is your first role as a CEO. No one's going to hire you ever again. Like, this is career suicide. How could you do that? And I thought, well, I have to. I have to. If my journey isn't valued or I'm not able to give back what I know and my knowledge for somebody else not to feel ashamed. And also because I have these skills because of what I went through. And I
Absolutely.
think what stands out to me is that we need to start valuing people's personal journeys more. It's not just about like, oh, our employees want to get involved in this cause, right? Like, no, your employees want to get involved in causes that matter to them for a reason, because they have experiences themselves that is drawing them to that cause. And I think that we need to stop thinking about it from the perspective of, we're going to take people's passions and put them somewhere else in this nonprofit. How about we take people's passions and experiences and learn how to utilize and channel those at work in business? And I think that that's sort of a different way of thinking about it.
Absolutely. And it's huge. And, tell us a little bit more about what you do for the Women's Chamber, because, I mean, we'll have all of your contact information in the show notes. And so please be sure to reach out to KRISTEN and to the Women's Chamber and to get involved. But KRISTEN, a big piece of what my understanding is that you do is really, how do we engage our membership? How do we provide the needs and the solutions to their needs? And how do we do these things that create this sense of belonging as
Right.
well as being a resource?
Right. Well, it's interesting because that's one of the things that drew me to this organization. So I've been a member of the Women's Chamber, longtime supporter for over 20 years in different roles, right? So I think when I first got involved, I had just moved back from New York City and started my own business. And so I joined the Women's Chamber at that time, and then had been involved with this organization in various roles because I did marketing and PR. And so it was always my involvement with the chamber. And I think one of the things that drew me to this organization is we're one of the largest and oldest women's chambers in the country.
Wow,
And I
congratulations.
know, it's so cool. And it's such an incredible organization. And you know, when you think about businesses, right, most don't even last that long. And
Right.
so the previous leadership did an incredible job of keeping this organization strong. But one of the things that I had noticed when I started is that the needs of women in business were very different than what they were 30 years ago. When you think, and it doesn't sound that long ago when you say the 80s, but in the 80s, women were just beginning to surpass men as far as getting college degrees. We were just entering into non-traditional careers for women. So when this organization was started, and what it was started for was primarily to help women-owned businesses just, network and provide education with each other and resources. And now we need women to grow. We need our community, our members, to rally around the fact that the statistics for women in business are still really weak. So 86% of women-owned businesses have only one employee in Colorado. That has not changed in decades. Wow. We are close to 9th in the nation for death rate of women-owned businesses. So they're starting and stopping. And, interestingly enough, those statistics for women-owned businesses mirror corporations too, right? Like, we're leaving the workforce in droves. We're not getting into the C-suite enough. Only 14% of us are CEOs in Colorado. So there's never been a more important time if you're going to get involved with a cause that affects you and other women, right? Most of us work, right? We all are contributing to the economy in some way, shape, or form. It's incredibly important for women these days to become self-sufficient so they have choices. So what we're really trying to do is rally our membership, rally our community around the advancement of women in business, and really look at innovative practices and ways to do that, because nobody really knows how. I think corporations are admitting it's important, but I don't think anybody really knows how. And that's what we're trying to incubate here. Like, how are we going to change it? What are we going to do? And get our members to dive in and do it.
That's so awesome. And
it's so fun.
Yeah, I commend what you ladies are doing over there. I mean, it is really powerful. And when you read some of those statistics that you have on your website and in your collateral, I mean, it's actually shocking. I had no idea that so few women sat on boards and were in here in Colorado.
I know. It's crazy. We're almost last in the nation for number of women on publicly traded boards. And, some of the data that we uncovered, so we've done some focus groups here at the Chamber. And the data that we uncovered is from our members' perspective, is that there's 3 things holding women back. Number 1 is unconscious bias in corporate culture, because that still exists, right? It hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Number 2 is communication. And basically how that plays out is how we communicate to ourselves, like our limiting beliefs. Oh, I can't do that, or I'm not qualified to do that, or, those sorts of things. And then number 3 is lack of mentorship and sponsorship. And so we do a little bit of programming around unconscious bias in corporate culture. We have our State of Women in Business event coming up, where we really address how to change that. But when I look at number 2 and 3, the way we communicate to ourselves, that's completely controllable. Remember, we talked about change and the change that you can create. Well, should we choose to, we can stop communicating to ourselves that way. We can start communicating to ourselves saying, yeah, I might not have every qualification that they're asking for, but I've got damn near enough, so I'm going to apply anyway, and I'm going to go for it. And guess what? I know I'm a single mom, but I want to be a CEO, so I'm going to dive in and I'm going to figure it out. Those are things that we can control with, I think, a little bit of training and programming. And then if you do some mentorship and sponsorship programs, we can show them other women that are doing that and how they've done it, and show them how to navigate it. So we really focus a lot of our programs on that, because those are the things that I think we can impact change with.
That's awesome. It's just exciting to be part of what you guys have going on over there. I talk to women literally on a weekly basis who are involved in what you're doing and are saying that, hey, having this support is totally changing my almost even just their awareness, which can change their actions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's huge. When you look at relationships, can you share with us how you believe that relationships can be critical to our success?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am without them. I was in an industry primarily dominated by women. I worked in marketing, right? So that's all women. So I've been so fortunate to have so many supportive women. So when I worked in New York City, I worked for the former VP of marketing for Liz Claiborne.
Wow.
So what an amazing mentor, right? And so she taught me everything she knew. And then when I went to Goodwill, that was primarily male dominated. And so interestingly enough, my mentor at Goodwill was a man. And he had worked in corporate America and really did so much for me as far as saying, okay, I think you could be a CEO, so I'm going to give you the skill set to do it. And talk about communication. Remember we talked about that? I told him, well, I can't do that. I'm a single mom. I can't be a CEO. I can't. And he was like, whoa, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'll give you the skills. He goes, let's find you a female mentor that you can talk about those other hurdles to and get over them. And so I had two very critical female mentor relationships where it wasn't just talking about like, well, what were the career steps that you took? It was, well, you were a single mom of 3 kids. How did you do that? Or how did you deal with your board? Because I don't understand how to do that. And really being able to be vulnerable. Yeah. So I think relationships with men and women are equally important. But I think the difference that I saw in the relationships that I had developed with women is that I could tell them my vulnerabilities and they would help me navigate and overcome them, right? It's just a different approach. And again, I have the job here as a CEO today because of relationships, right? So relationship with my boss at Goodwill, relationships with 2 mentors. And in fact, Donna Lynn, the former lieutenant governor of Colorado, was the one that was mentoring me, and she saw this job opening become available, and I had told her 3 years previous that I wanted to be a CEO of a small nonprofit like the Women's Chamber. And so she was like, here you go, you have to apply. And so I wouldn't have it. And then Christine Bonero, the CEO of Mile High United Way, coached me through the whole interview process, all of it. Like after every phone interview, after in-person interviews, doing my resume, like all of it, side by side. So I can't imagine a career world where it doesn't matter. And I worry a little bit sometimes about, social media. And, we really have a tough time with some of our events, networking events, and some of our programs because women are so overcommitted.
Yeah.
And so I did this little my own, I call it mother-in-law research because I did it myself. We didn't hire a company. And I was noticing towards the end of last year that, when we do all women's events, but I also go to other organizations' events that are all women. And I was noticing this pattern of, I always like to look at the name tags when I walk into it. Who's here? Who do I get to talk to? And I noticed about a 50% drop-off rate for women-only events. Like we're registering, but we're not showing up. And then in January, I was like, I wonder what it is with men. Like, I wonder if men have that same problem. No. Out of so let's say in a room full of 50 registrations, maybe 3 men don't show up.
Wow.
So I think what's going on, we're not lazy. We work incredibly hard. We are overbooking ourselves, and we're the first ones to give up something that has to do with our own promotion and our own advancement in a way that we're going to build relationships to get the job done, to get stuff taken care of for the kids, to clean the house, whatever it is. We give up our stuff in order to handle everything else. And men don't.
Right.
They don't. They know that relationships are critical, right? They just get it. And so I wish I had all the answers on how to change it. We're trying to come up with an app that provides resources. Like, oh my gosh, I have to go to this networking event tonight, but my son has this project due and I need somebody to help me. Or, just stuff like that so that we can put supports around it, because we're not going to change. We're not going to quit wanting to be home with our kids and being perfect about everything and wanting our house clean or whatever. But how can we make it so that we can begin to invest the time in building relationships? Because in the beginning, it doesn't seem like it's going to have a direct impact on your career, but it does. Yeah, that's how men have been navigating it all along.
It's huge. And you touched on several good points there, and it's true. It's just coming together and then figuring out how do we continue to prioritize the things that are really helping us get to where we're trying to go, but yet still maintaining all of these responsibilities that often end up on our plate.
Right. Yeah. So, you asked me about relationships. We can't navigate it without it, but I think we're still struggling.
Yeah. And especially in such a digital society, it's just like we took this pendulum and swung it all the way one direction. And it's sort of like we need to swing a little bit the other direction as well now.
Well, and what's so interesting about it is that I think in personal lives, we possess these skills, right? I noticed this interesting interaction with our members when I first started at the Women's Chamber that we really had to consciously change, where women were kind of awkwardly like, well, hi, I'm so-and-so, and here's my 30-second commercial, where I'm so-and-so. And I was like, what are you doing? We possess the skills to get to know each other on a very deep level. We can build relationships with individuals better than anyone. We just, I think, how they say that for the longest time, women were trying to behave like men in the workplace, right?
Right.
Well, we can teach this. We know how to do this, right? Men do that, right? They're like, hey, dude, oh yeah, I'm going to help you out with this. We possess the ability to be like, no, I'm going to do business with you, I hope, but I want to know you. Like, who are you married to? What kids do you have? Da, 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 da. And we really invest in these relationships. But when you think about the time that we'll put into that and how that will exponentially help us over our career, we already know how to do it. We just need to make the time to do it.
Yeah, that's huge. And then I think so much of it comes from just that support, and what you are offering at the Women's Chamber and what some of these other organizations offer is not necessarily that we're changing the culture, because that's a huge thing, whether it's on the job site or in the corporate world. It's a huge thing to take on the idea of changing the culture. But if we can create a sense of community and a sense of support, then all of a sudden when we're seemingly on our own out in that job site or in that workforce or in that position, we have this whole like backing behind us that we feel that strength and support from.
Yeah. And it's a community that has men and women in it. Right? Because there are so many men out there that I have met that want to see this change, that have a vested interest in seeing it change and want to be a part of it. So I feel very fortunate that we have a lot of male members that are getting involved too.
I think that's huge too. And, we get on these kicks that it's like, go women. And I'm all for that. But I really believe that I am all for that. I'm with you though, that there is this complementing side of the man or the male and female kind of role in these opportunities of collaboration, that sometimes the differences between us can actually be strengths when we can look at them and see how we're really complementing one another by working together.
Right. Yeah.
Do you have any advice that you think you would like to share with either your younger self, if you were looking back on that, or even just people who are kind of in this place now where they're like, I know I've got to build my network and maybe I just don't know how?
Well, it's so interesting. I think I used to think about, the idea of like change and some of the things that I've gone through. I've been through a divorce, I had a crazy upbringing, and I used to be like, well, I wish I would have chosen differently, or I wish I didn't have to grow up like that. And I think so often women, or maybe it's just me, but we're perfectionists. And we oftentimes want everything clean, and it's really just, it's not a reality. I think that if we can learn to pull on our emotional experiences, we are going to be incredibly kick-ass in the workplace, right? Like, so I wouldn't change a thing about any journey that I've gone through, any failure that I've had, because they all brought me to where I am today. And every single one of them has made me a stronger leader. And so I guess the advice that I would have for my younger self is dive in deeper, make more decisions, fail more, just do it. Quit saying like, oh, I don't know if I could do that, or we're so calculated. Like, just do it. You're going to learn from it.
That's huge. And that's great advice. It's like sometimes we get and I think you're right. Perfectionism is a huge hurdle for many of us. And it's great in some regard. We want to do things to the best of our ability, but really if it keeps us from ever making progress because we don't want to start until it's perfect, it can be a real stumbling block as well.
It's true.
Do you have anything exciting that you want to share, or that people can connect with you or get behind you on?
Oh my gosh, we do so much great work here at the Chamber, and we have an incredible community of members. I think, one of the things that I'm the most proud of with this organization is some of our larger events, because essentially what they do is they advocate. right? One of our biggest roles is to advocate on behalf of our community. And so the way that you do that is through education and educating the community. And so all of our events have some educational or inspirational component to them. The way that I explain it, or actually I can't take credit for this, one of our members told me this, but the way that I think of our membership is, you know, you have the woman walking on the stairs above you and you're holding her hand and you're grabbing the hand of the woman below you and you're all kind of walking up the stairs together. That's sort of what I think about with our events, because there's something magical about them. So we do 5 a year and they all have a component where you learn something. I think my favorite event that we do is called Girls Rising.
Okay.
And it's usually around high school graduation time, like the May timeframe. When I first started here at the Chamber, in my previous role at Goodwill, we had worked with Denver Public Schools and we worked with interns and, you know, tried to get them placed in different jobs just to get that work experience. And so when I started here, I thought, oh, I wonder if there's a way for us to work together here at the Women's Chamber. And they told me about these 2 young girls that had just completed an engineering internship. And they actually invented an aerosol detector that is still in use today in the sky, right?
Wow.
And I thought, I want to profile these young girls. This is incredible. And that sort of spawned the Girls Rising event now that has expanded. And so we're raising awareness for young women that are going into really non-traditional careers. So girls that at the age of, 18 are like, I want to be a CEO someday, right? Or I want to be an engineer. I want to go into construction. I want to go into the skilled trades. I want to be a welder. Like these things that we sort of shy away from.
Right.
And we're actually giving out scholarships and we hear the young girls' stories and it's such an inspiring event. So I would say most of our events are like that, where we show really incredible women doing amazing things. So that one's a good one to watch for.
That's exciting. And we will have all of that information so people can register and attend the events and check out the 5 big events you do all year. I know you also offer, groups for CEOs and, some of that. Can you tell us about some of the smaller groups that people can get involved in?
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the best things about our membership. And I'll tell you why. Research shows that, especially as a woman, if you have a peer group of supporters around you that are there to empower you and inspire you, you will be more successful in your career or in running your business. And we have found that to be absolutely true. And so we break it up. So we have a CEO group for women-owned businesses that are below $1 million and a CEO group for businesses that are above $1 million. So there's a statistic in Colorado that says that less than 1% of women-owned businesses ever get over $1 million in revenue.
Wow.
And so with that CEO group, we're really trying to bring in speakers to encourage them to grow. And then with the ones with, over $1 million, they have employees and their challenges are just a little bit different. And so they really provide a lot of incredible support. I'll never forget in that group, we had a woman, we go around the room and we do check-ins with each other, like how you're doing on a scale of 1 to 5, both personally and professionally. And so it got to one of the women in the room and she said, well, I'm doing a 5 professionally. And then she started crying. And as a result, I'm a 1 personally, because I have no time for myself, no time for my family, no time. And it was, which we can all relate to, right?
Right.
What was interesting about it is the women just rallied around her, but unlike anything I've ever seen, right? So if we tell that to our girlfriends, they're gonna be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, and give you a hug. Let's go have a glass of wine. That's not what happened here. They wanted to have wine too, but they rallied around her and gave her ideas. Like, oh, okay, have you thought about getting an assistant, even just for a couple hours a week? Have you thought about this? Or I did that, or here's some tricks with email. Here's some of the things that I did to delegate to my employees. So it was just all of those wonderful things that you get from the support of women, but really good business ideas as well. And so there's those 2 groups. And then we have a corporate women's support group, because again, I feel like the challenges for women in corporations to grow are a little bit different. And so we provide programming for those groups to figure out, okay, how are you going to grow your career? How are you going to navigate that?
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
really, no matter where you fall in, what business category you're in, what kind of company you're in, if you're an entrepreneur or you're working for a company, you are offering some sort of support and education for those women.
Absolutely. And we want them to grow. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And KRISTEN, keep up the good work. I mean, your reputation in this community is so solid, and people very much admire and appreciate what you're doing for the women in this community and the business owners in this community. And so I just am so appreciative that you took the time to be here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so
And
thank you.
just to call out, I look at myself as sort of a channeler, right? And like all of the things that we're doing are channeled through me, through our membership. So I always like to call that out, because if you think about that and what it's doing for this organization, think about joining a community like this and what it'll do for your career, your business, because it's incredible.
Yeah, that's huge. And I've never heard it said exactly like that, but a channeler is a really good way to see it.
Yeah.
You're very skilled at seeing needs and then helping to facilitate solutions and ways for those needs to become, almost triumphs over challenges.
Right. Yeah.
So thank you again so much for being on. And before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Oh gosh. No, I think just the idea of, really just putting a call to action out there as a woman in business, and even men in business, like, let's just change this. Can we change this already? The latest McKinsey & Company report said that it's going to take women 107 years to catch up to where men are. 2 years ago, it was 100. So the statistics are going in the wrong direction. So let's just rally around this and change it. For not just for us, but for our kids and for future generations, it's got to change. It's important. So I'll just put that call to action, cry for help out there.
Awesome. Well, please respond to KRISTEN's cry for help, and let's rally together. I mean, it is truly just that we are more powerful and more successful together than we are individually.
Yeah.
Well, KRISTEN, thank you so much for being here. We look forward to
us. Thank you for doing what you do.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's just so fun to hear exciting stories from interesting people, and really understanding that truly at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is just be a resource and help support the people in your network and in your community.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's all for this episode of Social Capital Expert. Please visit socialcapitalexpert.com for show notes, additional episodes, and to see who will be visiting us next on the show. Also, be sure to check out our upcoming Social Capital Mixers. These are events where we can connect in person to build social capital. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to having you join us for the next episode.